Iboan, Constantino, Dr. Wallace, Ambassador Menon, and to everybody who's joining in on this conference virtually. Again, my profuse apologies for not being able to join you live. I'm in the throes of finishing up my PhD, and I sometimes forget to eat, leave aside managing my schedule and my timetable, and I got the dates completely messed up. I have, at this very time, a lecture that I have to deliver to the University of Edinburgh on constitutionalism and architecture based on a project that a lecturer there and I did in Sri Lanka. And I got the dates and times completely messed up, and I profusely apologize for this oversight on my part. I'm sure Dr. Wallace has given an overview of the Chinese interests and behavior on social media, particularly looking at their information operations over the course of last year and during the pandemic in particular. I think what what Constantino wanted me to talk about, complementing Dr. Wallace's presentation, is the nature of social media led by or handled by or curated by the Chinese in Sri Lanka, which is new in a sense. The one account that I have been studying most closely is the official account of the Chinese embassy in Colombo, which was started in April last year. So it's relatively new, but it's a curious beast, and it's unlike any other diplomatic account in the country, in the history of diplomacy in the country over social media. So it's a unique account, and more globally as well, reflected locally in Sri Lanka. It's quite exceptional. So I'll speak very quickly and a little to that, and I'll let Dr. Wallace handle the international. Though I think the Sri Lankan example, mirrors what is happening internationally as well in very interesting ways. I don't need to tell you that Sri Lanka is a unique case. The two governments are very close to each other. We are significantly in debt to Sri Lanka's government, and Sri Lanka is significantly in debt to China. We are central to and a key node in their Belt and Road Initiative. You know all about the port and the security sector. So there is a context and history to the exceptionalism presented by the Chinese over their Twitter account in particular. So it started off in April 2020. So I did a data dive. My doctoral work is on social media in Sri Lanka. So this is second nature to me, though I'm not looking at the Chinese in particular. If you take a look at what they published over 2020, up until yesterday, COVID-19 is the predominant frame, but it's very pro-Chinese, pro-China. There is, and I'm looking at my notes here, there is a lot of emphasis on friendly relations between the two governments, what China is presenting and gifting and giving and supporting the Sri Lankan government around. There's a lot of talk about solidarity and diplomatic relations, but also pre-diplomatic relations, in a sense that it goes beyond the two governments of today, and it goes into the history of the relations between the two countries as well. And there's a lot of discussion between and referencing to, which is quite extraordinary, the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Sri Lanka, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in China, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, who's the president's brother and the former president of Sri Lanka. It gets very complicated in Sri Lanka, as you know. The Health Promotion Bureau, which is part of the Ministry of Health, and a lot of journalists. So that's where, in fact, my engagement started, because when it started in April, it was really aggressive and hostile, totally unlike any other diplomatic account. So they actually came at me quite strongly. And of course, as a researcher, I was fascinated by this. And it's a wonderful moment for people like me to kind of really get our hands dirty into looking at who is tweeting, where, who they're tweeting at, what is the nature of the content, who is part of the network, etc. So it seems to be the case that they have very strong interest in reaching out to or promoting or projecting or framing positively the two governments and Sri Lanka's president and prime minister in particular. There's a lot of original tweets, and that's the other thing. It is extraordinary, the volume of tweets produced by this account. So just in April, the first month of its operation, I compared it to the US Embassy's account, which was started 11 years ago. And if you divvy up the totality of the tweets published by the U.S. Embassy over 11 years, it's about 68 a month over those 11 years. In April alone, though, China's account produced 600 tweets. Now, it's kind of declined over the rest of the year, but it's by far the most voluminous account in Sri Lanka and in the history of diplomatic accounts in Sri Lanka as well. So it's like an everyday tsunami in a sense. It's the flooding of Chinese perspectives and frames through this account onto the diplomatic landscape of the country. It's also quite hostile, and I want to reiterate that it goes again. It really, engages with journalists in a rather aggressive manner, and journalists who frame or project or tweet or kind of critically investigate or interrogate China's role, particularly around the pandemic, both in Wuhan and also its help and support and connections with the Sri Lankan government over the course of 2020. As I said, it went after me quite aggressively, but it does go after other commentators as well. Some of them are journalists, some of them are known commentators in the country. Now, that account, the Chinese embassy's official account, is also twinned with another account linked to the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, that account is actually far more diplomatic, which is quite weird actually. It seems to be handled by a Sri Lankan. That account, so the BRI account's emphasis is on the economy, on obviously the Belt and Road Initiative. Now that account also has very highly the president and the prime minister of the country always reference, but there's also Pompeo, there's Trump, there's Biden, there's the US ambassador and the US embassy, which is also referenced quite a bit. So it's, it really pushes the pro-China perspective onto these accounts as well. So that's generally a very, very quick overview. The one other thing that is unique to the China embassy's account in particular, but also BRI, is forgive me if I'm using a technical term, it's called a sock puppet. Sock puppet accounts, think of it as accounts that don't really have an owner behind it. I have an account and I am behind it. Probably some of you on the call, including Ambassador Menon, has accounts, and we are the ones who handle those accounts. Sock puppet accounts are quasi-automated or fully automated accounts that exist for a variety of purposes. One of the purposes is amplification. So think of it like a fake fan base or a fake following, which serves to amplify and to give the impression that what you're putting out is widely accepted, or there's a chorus of support around what could actually be something that is quite marginal or is not really accepted by the rest of the world. And also these sock puppet accounts can serve to amplify hostility. So if there's a particular account targeted by, say, for example, the Chinese embassy account, then these sock puppet accounts can also retweet it or, like it, and also then amplify the kind of hostility or attention against a particular account. Now, this kind of behavior is extraordinary. You do not find this kind of behavior or this kind of what researchers call a data signature around any other diplomatic account in the country. It simply hasn't existed. So this is actually quite new, and it's actually actively supported to the extent that we can determine or I can see in the data by the official account as well. So, it's very obvious that they have no problems with this kind of behavior. In Sri Lanka, this account is, as I said, complicated to understand because it fits into the Sri Lankan government's relationship with China. There's a huge amount of Huawei infrastructure in the country. There are concerns about surveillance. All of Parliament's networking is by the Chinese. MPs were given and gifted laptops by the Chinese. So the back-end infra through to the consumer facing and consumer end broadband equipment is all Chinese. The port city is called a smart city, and it's propelled and undergirded and founded upon Chinese infrastructure from telco through to the broadband and the consumer end devices. And a leading telecom company is also now projecting, rather promoting and selling facial recognition around both the backend infrastructure, the data collection, and the cameras, which are from Huawei. So there's a whole range of concerns that I don't have time on this call or this message to get into, but the social media accounts fall under the larger landscape of Chinese interests in Sri Lanka. They are extraordinary. They are new. They recommend close study because the kind of responses that diplomacy is used to do not work. Here is a new argot. This is a new vocabulary, both in terms of the production and promotion, but also in terms of the language and the framing and the expression and the targeting, through to the manner in which these accounts are set up and created and curated, that is entirely new. And I think Dr. Wallace will also kind of undergird and inform that perspective from a more global dimension as well. I have read up on it, but I don't need to re-articulate. But Dr. Wallace is the expert around. So I'll end with that. Again, very, very sorry for this recording and my inability to kind of join you, but I do hope you have a fruitful and productive discussion. Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.